Professor Wolff, you're the only person that I really can trust to give me the true skinny on some of the things that are going on, but specifically, can you weigh in on this narrative of a worker shortage?
I'd be glad to, Juliana, because it's offensive in my mind. It's an extraordinary example of how a capitalist economic system lines up the good guys and the bad guys and distinguishes them. So let me do it this way. We're just coming off the worst 14, 15 months probably in American history on many levels. Yeah, we've had depressions economically before, and yeah, we've had viral pandemics before. But what we've never had as a country is the combination of both those things at the same time. And to give you just a sense, the United States is 4% of the world's population, but we have suffered 20% of the world's deaths from COVID. To give you the other dimension, at least 82 million Americans, which is more than half of the total labor force of this country, had to file unemployment compensation claims over the last 14 months. Some of them were only unemployed a few weeks. Some of them were unemployed the entire time, and then everything in between. That is unheard of. More than half of the people had to go through a period of wondering whether they'd get their job back, under what conditions they'd get their job back. They had to live on unemployment, which meant they had to dip into their savings if they had any, or become a burden on their family and friends during a depression plus a COVID disaster. I mean, people have been through the ringer. Parents having to deal with their children who could not go to school. I mean, I could go on and on. And in that situation, what the government of the United States did, which was modest enough, was to kick in an extra $300 on top of your regular per week, on top of your unemployment, to help you through this worst situation. So what have we got? The economy is slowly coming back because vaccination seems to be helping out in terms of the disease. And that's good news. I'm not questioning that. But people still have enormous problems. They lost income over the last 14 months. They may have gone through the disease of a loved person in their family or close to them. They have used up any savings they've had. They have children with physical or mental issues because of the upsets of the last 14 years. Now, they want to come back to work, but they've got to solve all these problems. And they don't want to go into a workplace that hasn't been made super safe because they've been scared for 14 months. They need an employer who really spent some money to make sure that this place they're coming back to really is safe. They have to deal with help for their children to get ready to go back to school or to go back to school or to get some help to make up for what they didn't get in the way of schooling that they needed, on and on and on. So guess what? They're willing to come back to work, but they want a safe job and they want decent money, including a bit of an extra in order to help cope with what they just went through and which isn't over. Now, all that's happening is employers, and let's be fair to them, they've had a rough year too. They couldn't make any money. They had to learn or relearn the old lesson that you can have wonderful machines and you can have wonderful product, but if you don't have the worker there to make it happen, you're not going to get anything. So they've appreciated their workers. They want them back. Okay, you want to make up the money you lost? Okay, but you can't do it by not spending money on safety and by not offering people an adequate return wage. And you know what the working class of America is doing? They're saying in record numbers, we're not coming back to work unless You make it safe, and you give us an appropriate wage, given everything that's happened. And all that the words labor shortage mean is that the employers don't want to do it. They're not providing the safe environment, and they're not providing adequate wages. You want to overcome the shortage? I got news for you. Jack up the wages, make the working place safe. The shortage will disappear. The real purpose of the very phrase labor shortage is to justify the corporations wanting workers dirt cheap, not pay them, not spend money, and blame them somehow for there not being a deal made that brings folks back to work. It's particularly outrageous for parents and for the mothers who are the usual caretakers, particularly for smaller children. How are they supposed to juggle all of the extra problems that the COVID and the past year meant for them, and you don't give them any help at all? You want them to come back. Who's going to take care of the children? Who's going to give them the little extra attention, that can mean so much under these circumstances? It's an outrageous insult not to offer people a safe place and the extra wage, which may not even be much beyond what they got before. That's the problem here. It's the corporate employer class that's holding things up, not the workers. And calling it a labor shortage is an attempt to put the blame where it doesn't belong.
What do you make of states who are trying to, pull back that $300 and the unemployment and cut things off, or at least let it trickle out? Joe Biden even talked about maybe it's time to let it go. What do you make of states who are doing that? Do people have to be desperate in order to go back to work?
That's what we're doing. For me, it is even more shameful than what I've just been talking about. In other countries, if you take away the supports you provide people that they deserve in a time of extraordinary difficulty, $300 a week, as anyone in America knows, is not going to make you a very rich person in this country at this time, not even close. $300 is a recognition that we're going through an exceptional time. When you propose, as by the way, 25 out of the 50 states in this country, as of now, have taken that away. And the rest of them are scheduled to take it away in September. That's called forced labor in other countries. You're forcing people back. And if you listen to the governors of the states that have been doing it, most of whom are Republicans and should be called out for it, some of them even admit it. They admit that they are taking money away from people to make them desperate enough because they can't get by, so they'll go and take the underpaid, crappy job that before they didn't. I know that most workers who are not going back to work have other reasons for doing it. The $300 isn't the make or break, but it is an outrageous response to the worst 14 months in this country's history to take away. That's forced labor. You're forcing people to go back to work by threatening them, or in this case, actually hurting them, so that they have to get the money from a bad job, underpaid, because the alternative is even worse.
So here's a question. If, say, Amazon, Walmart, Costco, BJ, some of these big employers start actually paying a living wage or $15 an hour, or as you've said, I think if it kept up with inflation from the 70s, it would be $23 an hour. If they start paying that, how would, say, smaller privately owned businesses survive, which it seems like we need those in order to fight against this giant corporate takeover we are living through? I have a friend, she has a restaurant, she can't find a dishwasher. If Amazon and Walmart start paying $15 an hour, she's not going to be able to find a dishwasher ever.
Absolutely. The big companies are taking the lead. Amazon is proudly taking the lead. They want us to be happy and celebrate that they're raising the minimum wage, but they're giggling on the way to the bank because they know that they're destroying their small business competitors. It's a very ugly part of capitalism, as if we didn't have enough other ugly parts. And let me pick up on one point of yours and build it up a little bit. The latest statistics indicate that something as fundamental as food here in the United States is now rising in price at a rate about 5% per year, and is expected to continue and possibly get even higher in the rest of this year, 2021. You know what that means? It means not only will the big businesses, by raising wages to $15 an hour, screw all the small businesses that can't survive because no one is helping them. You know, the government it could come into a small business and say, in our society, we want you to be able to pay people $15 or $20 an hour, but we don't want you to go out of business as a result. So here's a tax break. Here's a subsidy that will allow us in America to
Here's
have
some free health insurance that
right, have the small business community that we believe we want, without making people live on less than $15 an hour. These two objectives can be met. The idea that we have to choose between them is only making good things for the richest of us and the big corporations who we shouldn't be pandering to in the first place. But here's the worst of it. Even if you raise the wages to $15 an hour between now and the year 2025, which is what most of these proposals are about, if you're raising the price of food by 5% a year, $15 isn't worth $15 in 2 to 3 years, because the price of everything you're paying, starting with your food, which you can't do without, has been rising. So the whole thing is like a mirror game in which you are pretending to do what the society needs, but are in fact destroying small business, undercutting your working class. How in the world are people who just got $300 taken away going to pay 5% more for the box of cereal they want to give their kid in the morning? I mean, it really is a time in which the economic system we live in is failing. It is falling apart. It is not providing people with the basics of a job and security and income for their families that it is supposed to do. And when an economic system can't perform, then it's time to say, hey, we can do better than this, and we ought to be working on it.
Professor Wolff, it's always great to have your insights. Thank you so much for talking to us about this issue.
My pleasure. My pleasure.